I guess we'll call ourselves to order. Sandy, could you confirm our quorum?
Chair, we'll start with a roll call vote. Asada Brown,
Present.
Monica Dillenberg, I'm sorry.
Present.
Cecily Harris,
Here.
Todd Kemry. Not seen him yet. Bob Moeller,
Aye.
Jeremy Peichel,
I'm here.
Anthony Taylor. Not seen him. Canna Yang. Not seen her either. Tony Russo.
Here.
Okay, that is a quorum.
All right, thank you, Sandy. Next up is approval of our agenda. I don't know if we really need an agenda amendment exactly for this, but just prior to our business, I think we're going to let Linnea make an announcement, and we'll just launch into that. That's probably fine. Are there any other changes to our agenda needed? All right, hearing none, we can approve our agenda by consensus. Then we'll have approval of minutes from September 2nd, and we will take a motion and second for those.
This is Jeremy. I'll move to approve.
Okay, we have a motion to approve as presented. Is there a second for that?
I'll second. This is Cecily.
Second by Cecily, thank you. Do we have any corrections to those minutes? All right, hearing none, we'll proceed with a vote on that motion to approve as presented. Sandy will call roll on that as well.
Okay, we'll start with Asada Brown,
Aye.
Monica Dillenberg,
Aye.
Cecily Harris,
Aye.
Todd Kemry. Not here. Bob Moeller,
Aye.
Jeremy Peichel,
Aye.
Anthony Taylor, Canna Yang,
Aye.
and Tony Russo.
Aye.
All right, that motion carries.
Great, so our minutes are approved from last month. Brings us to public invitation. We're taking these by email to public info address. Staff, did we receive any comments this month?
We did not, Chair. Thank you.
Not that I'm aware, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. So then we'll turn this briefly over to Linnea just to fill us in on something. Go ahead.
Hello, everybody. I hope you can see and hear me okay. If I could get just like a thumbs up from somebody, that'd be great. I'm calling you from, calling in from Peter Worth Regional Park, where I just dropped my son off for mountain bike practice. Thanks, Bob, for that thumbs up. I am just sharing with the group that after a long period of contemplation, I have decided to resign from the Met Council, which means I also will not be continuing to serve as a liaison for the Metropolitan Parks and Open Space Commission. For personal and professional reasons, it was a decision I needed to make for myself and my family. I hope that everyone can understand that, and I want to share my deepest appreciation for the work of all of the commissioners. In particular, Chair Tony Russo, I am deeply grateful for you being willing to serve another term at my request, and the amazing amount of knowledge and commitment and resource you are to our region. To Bob, who I talked into serving another year, I want to thank you and Anthony Taylor for your ongoing leadership and continuity on the commission, and your partnership and leadership in advancing equity. And to the new committee members, and in particular Sada, who I invited, and I'm so glad to have per voice new this year, midterm, coming into the council. I am deeply, deeply grateful and excited and proud of the work of this group. I just wanted to thank you all of the new members who've joined in the last 2 years during a really unique time due to the pandemic and racial reckoning that we are facing in our community here locally. And tell you that in my letter to the governor, I wrote about the work of you as commissioners, the leadership, and am so proud of the equity grants that we've gotten off the ground, the previous commissioners, the Met Council, and that you have expanded to really meet the call of communities who have historically been underserved in our regional parks and trails. I'm not disappearing from the work. I will be changing and acting as a citizen. And maybe one day I'll even throw my hat in the ring to be a commissioner on the Metropolitan Parks and Open Space Commission. So just wanted to say from the deepest part of my heart, this has been one of the most, if not the most rewarding part of my time at the Met Council, getting to know each and every one of you and working with you and the work in parks and open spaces. Thank you so much for all of your service and the sacrifices you all make to be a part of this work.
Thank you, Linnea. It's been great having you as our liaison and voice to the council. Certainly appreciate everything you've been able to do with us. And hope to see you around in other ways. Now you can be the one that bugs us by email about things, and I'm sure we'll hear some things from that as well.
Yeah,
It's always tricky when you can't serve out a full term, but life happens and it's hard to balance.
Linnea, you have been a wonderful addition to our commission, and I'm so sorry to see you moving on, but I do understand for personal reasons. But know that you have been so appreciated, and your ideas and your guidance and your positive attitude have been infectious and so much appreciated. Best of luck.
All right. And with that, we'll head into our business for the day. So we first up have a request for consent to easement for Carver Park Reserve and Three Rivers Park District, and we have Jessica Lee to present that.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Great. Good afternoon, Chair, Commissioners, and Council Member. I'm Jessica Lee, Senior Parks Planner, here to present business item 2021-264, request for consent to easement at Carver Park Reserve for Three Rivers Park District. Next slide, please. Carver Park Reserve is located near Victoria in Carver County and is managed by Three Rivers Park District. With over 3,500 acres, Carver Park Reserve is one of the largest parks in the regional system. It is home to the Lowry Nature Center, the Grimm Farm Historic Site, the King Waterbird Sanctuary, and is known for its winding trails, rolling wooded terrain, and interconnected lakes and marshes. Next slide, please. Three Rivers Park District has requested a consent to easement from the council so that they may enter into an easement agreement with the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources for groundwater monitoring. Three Rivers and the DNR have an established partnership for groundwater monitoring with wells located at Elm Creek, Crow-Hassan, and Highland Park Reserves. To enhance this monitoring network, the DNR would like to add a monitoring well at Carver Park Reserve. The map on the left shows where this well would be located. Next slide, please. Three Rivers and the DNR have an easement agreement for a nest of up to 7 wells to be located at Carver Park Reserve for a term of 20 years with a possible extension of 10 years. The location of this well, or nest of wells, is shown on the map on the right. This area is approximately 0.3 acres and was chosen for its easy access and minimal natural resources disturbance. Because this parkland was funded in part with council bonds, there is an ARC, or Agreement and Restrictive Covenant, placed on the parcel. The ARC protects the land from any changes of use without council consent. A consent to easement from the council is required before Three Rivers and the DNR can execute their groundwater monitoring easement agreement. The council's real estate office has reviewed this request and is prepared to give consent upon council approval. Next slide, please. The DNR has a groundwater strategic plan to help protect our state's water resources. Some of the goals of this plan include improving information about groundwater resources, reinforcing partnerships to provide better support for sustainable groundwater use, improving compliance with existing groundwater regulations, assuring that permits for large water appropriations provide a sustainable source of groundwater for future generations, and concentrating action in areas of high use and/or limited supply. The DNR's groundwater monitoring program meets the goals of the strategic plan in part with regular aquifer checks through a system of groundwater monitoring wells and through data collected from permit holders reporting. Council's consent to easement would help Three Rivers and the DNR meet their groundwater monitoring strategic goals, as well as help monitor water quantity and quality for the region. Next slide, please. Staff's rationale is that the proposed consent to easement is consistent with Chapter 6 of the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan, System Protection Strategy 6, Utilities, which states that it may be necessary to grant easements on parkland to distribute utilities and services such as drinking water. Three Rivers and council staff concur that the wells are supportive of the use of groundwater for the betterment of the regional park system, and that the location of the wells will not adversely affect or impact park users' recreational activities or the surrounding natural resources. Next slide, please. The proposed action is that the Metropolitan Council consent to Three Rivers Park District granting an easement as described in the attachment to the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources for groundwater monitoring at Carver Park Reserve, and require Three Rivers Park District to record a consent to easement document executed by the Metropolitan Council's regional administrator. And thank you for your time, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Jessica. Does anyone have questions on that? Or if it all seems straightforward, we can take a motion.
This is Bob. I would make a motion to accept the recommendation.
Okay, we have a motion for the proposed actions from the staff report. Is there a second for that?
This is Monica. I second that.
Okay, second from Monica. Thank you. So the motion on the table is that the Metropolitan Council consent to Three Rivers Park District granting an easement as described in the attachment to the Minnesota DNR for groundwater monitoring at Carver Park Reserve, and require Three Rivers Park District to record a consent to easement document executed by the Metropolitan Council's regional administrator. Is there any discussion on that motion? All right, hearing none, we'll go ahead and proceed to a vote. Sandy will call the roll.
Okay, we have a quiet group today. We'll start with Asada Brown,
Aye.
Monica Dillenberg,
Aye.
Cecily Harris,
Aye.
Todd Kemry. He's out. Bob Moeller,
Aye.
Jeremy Peichel,
Aye.
Anthony Taylor. Has he shown up? No. Kenny Yang
Aye.
and Tony Russo.
Aye.
That motion carries.
All right, thank you. That's an easy one. That brings us on then to our information item for the day, which is going to be a presentation about the Regional Park System Marketing and Communications Study completed with CCF. We have several staff members covering bits of this. I have Emmett, Amanda, and Michelle on the docket. Go ahead with that.
Well, thank you, Tony, and commissioners. Again, I'm Emmett Mullen, the Regional Parks Manager, and I am going to kick us off this afternoon. I'm really excited about this information item discussion. So the idea is that we'll present the findings of this marketing and communication study, and then we really want to discuss it with you. This Regional Park System Marketing and Communication Study is an effort that we've heard the commission discuss over the years, this desire to explore what is the appropriate council role with the regional park system and a marketing and communications strategy. There seems to be a desire to tell a stronger regional story. So this is particularly true, and I've heard commissioners talk about this with our, for instance, regional trail network. As our regional trail network continues to grow and interconnect, it seems like it's a place of opportunity. It being talking for the system. This is also true of our regional parks. But we're very fortunate to have Scott Denham and Julie Bixby with us today. They work with CCF, which is a strategic communications agency that has an ongoing relationship with the council. At the end of this presentation, Michelle Fury from our Department of Communications and Amanda Lovely will help facilitate a discussion on this topic. So I will pass it now, if that makes sense, to Scott.
Thank you, Emmett. I appreciate that introduction. Would it be all right if I shared my screen and went through this? Otherwise, I'm happy to say next slide, whichever is easier for everyone. Perfect.
Looks like Greg is giving you control.
Thank you, Greg. It will probably make things go more smoothly. So, all right, is everyone seeing my, you're probably seeing too much of my screen. 1 second here.
All right, now we have the window view, not the full screen presentation.
Got it. How's that?
There you go. Yep.
Perfect. All right. Well, again, thank you, Emmett, for that introduction. We are excited to present this information. We spoke to many of you who are on the call here today, and we've got some pretty clear findings and some good recommendations, I think, for the future of how we communicate about our regional park system. So today I'm going to outline those the reporting on those findings, and then talk about our recommendations, and all of us will, I think, have a discussion on what those next steps would be. Excuse me. As Emmett outlines, the objectives of what we're looking into through this study was, how do we remove barriers that prevent parks usage and to create more of an equitable system overall? How do we bring that unity to our system? Do we consider doing more of a unified effort on how we promote and talk about our regional parks, even though we are separate entities? And then how do we create more of a sustainable marketing and communications platform from which we can actively tell a unified story for the benefit of all? Our objectives overall were, it was a mix of qualitative and quantitative research that we did, and we did so to try and understand these things. Does a unified approach, that idea of a unified approach, create a unified and equitable system? How do we, in doing so, create a system that serves the needs from everyone? And what are the barriers out there that we may have to address and improve upon overall? Our methodology, we did speak to, like I said, many of you. We were talking to people that were familiar with the council and familiar with parks, and I do want to make that point clear. We did not, in this study anyway, do a larger outreach to people that are unaware, but we did this to provide a baseline and to answer the questions that I outlined. So we did 16 stakeholder interviews representing the entire, all agencies throughout the system. We expanded that amongst other stakeholders in an online survey. And then we also surveyed park users, current park users, to understand their awareness and usage of those parks. So this is the feedback that we received. When talking about what is the role of regional parks and trails overall, people acknowledge the value that you have and that regional parks provide to the area, to the system. And the way they articulated your role overall is that protector of those natural resources and providing nature-based amenities and activities throughout the region. They also talked a lot about the unifying efforts that you provide in unifying all agencies and helping to grow the region. What value do you as a regional parks system entity provide to the overall region and the agencies involved? The way this was getting at, you know, what do you as an entity help provide and support for all entities overall? And the big thing that came through was collaboration, because everyone did acknowledge that we are really 10 individual agencies trying to run parks. And as a regional system, the regional parks team don't necessarily run those parks, but the collaboration and the unity that you provide in bringing those entities together to try and build something new was really important to all. In terms of what we could improve upon as a regional park system, the big thing that came through was just greater awareness overall, greater awareness of the individual entities, of the amenities that the parks provide, helping to improve our communication overall was a big factor that came through. And the other items were things such as recognizing the differences in the different parks and the entities, and the desire maybe for them to do things differently than what maybe the council is recommending at times. So this idea of autonomy and autonomous decision making also came through, and in saying that it may not be a one-all be-all approach to how funds are used. There was a lot of conversation towards, hey, we understand the desire. Let us figure out the best way to approach that with our area. There also was the conversation about equity. Equity came up quite a bit. It's recognized across the system the need to get more equity in park usage and get more diversity in our audiences that are using our facilities. And so there's a great desire to for the Met Council to help in that approach overall. When talking about what the public perceptions are of the regional park system, this really got at the notion of, should we start to brand and promote what a regional park is? And the reality is that people in general don't understand if they're in a regional park, a city park, a county park. They don't understand the distinctions of those entities. They just know that they're in a park and they're enjoying a park. So for them, a park is a park, and that's what they're seeking out. So the perception of a regional park system was kind of lacking. We asked people to rate on a scale of 1 to 10, you know, what's your awareness and understanding of a regional park? And it came in at a 4. So people are not understanding that the park and the system that they're using at any given time is actually a regional park versus other things within their mindset. When talking about what our opportunities are as a whole, a lot of people brought up the opportunity to further connect what the regional entities are doing, what they're providing, and the role that the Met Council plays in unifying those individuals. The big thing was bringing people together for that larger purpose, which was to get people to use parks, to participate in activities that they were potentially unaware of. So people saw that as a huge opportunity. Things like the maintaining and expanding on our regional trail system was brought up as ways in which we can continue to do that and help drive usage overall. We started to dig in on barriers, and you know, things such as transportation rose to the top. Fees and transportation were the things that were mentioned quite often. An area of an opportunity that people did bring up was, hey, how does the Met Council help us bridge that transportation gap? They have, you know, other entities like Metro Transit. How could we potentially start to unify the regional park system through transportation options. But overall, the things that rose to the top were assumptions. They were people saying, we think it's a language barrier. We think maybe it's funding overall and the fees. We don't totally understand through this survey anyway, what's keeping people out of the parks, people that are unaware or not using us right now, because we were speaking to the people that are using us right now, or to constituents that know how we operate. And we just wanted to make a point on this, that these are some assumed barriers that probably have a lot of validity, but it would be great to continue to study that and confirm those assumptions and help to identify what those potential solutions would be. This quote, though, came out, and I think this is really a good insight overall as to why people might not be using a park or seeking out a park. And the overall saying, I think the barrier of being outside of one's comfort zone and outside of one's community and wondering what I'm going to face, those are the things that we need to overcome to get people to use a park. And if you think about this, think about people that have not been exposed to nature and don't know what I'm getting into, and asking them to go outside of their area to experience that is a hurdle to overcome. But I think there's ways in which we can address that, and we'll get into that in the recommendations that we have. Speaking of communications and how we're communicating with visitors overall, things that came up were there's a lot of discussion on how we can communicate and show that we have other entities within the system providing similar benefits. So if people are going to a park for a certain activity, how do we connect them to other parks in the region that serve similar things? Social media came up as a big opportunity. People are using social media to document and promote their usage of parks and entities. But right now, our regional parks social presence is really tied to the Met Council's social presence. And people aren't necessarily following park users, aren't necessarily following the Metropolitan Council. They would be interested, though, probably in following and interacting with an entity, a social media entity, that is promoting the thing that they like to do. So that was highlighted as an opportunity overall. But the overall communication efforts, there was a lot of conversation around getting people to experience one park and connect them to another. One good example that came up was, hey, maybe someone's using Theo Wirth for biking, and they're getting in there, much like we talked about earlier. They're in there using the mountain bike trails, experiencing that. That's what they know. That's their local park. But how do we connect them to maybe a resource in Carver, for example, and get them outside of that area, but it's doing a type of experience that they are seeking out. Videos came up quite a bit. This notion of breaking down the perception or the unknowns of what that park experience is going to be. So how am I seeing people like myself experiencing that park, or understanding what that park provides before I go out of my way to seek that out? So the idea of breaking down barriers, connecting people, showing them that there are like activities in other areas of the region, all came out in terms of how we could be communicating better. And all of this was with the intent of amplifying what everyone is doing. So how does the regional parks team in particular work to amplify the region? And there's agreement from everyone that the desire is to cross-promote just to get people into parks. So much of the things that I've been talking about. But how do we do so in a way that doesn't require everyone to be on the same platform and everyone to do it in a certain way? And it's a heavy lift, but this idea of without requiring a huge conformity project that came up from many entities, where in the past maybe we've tried to all get aligned on a shared calendar, and it doesn't work across entities. So it is something to consider and look at how do we do that, and then create additional tools that allow local agencies to connect people to other activities within the system. This quote came out, and I think this is really key, and it goes back to if am comfortable using a park for a certain activity, now I'm more comfortable potentially of going and exploring others. So if someone gets their foot in the door and they're in a local park that provides that activity, how do we arm those local, each agency with a way to say, hey, you liked it here, there's other opportunities within the region. And there's a lot of, people wanted to do that across agencies. They noted the fact that we can help maybe drive diversity to other regions and by connecting people with activities. So one of the big questions that we posed here and we were trying to solve, that Emmett talked about in the beginning, was should we market and create a regional parks and trails brand? What is there benefit in it, and what would that take? And our recommendations coming out of this, based on the conversation and the opportunity, was that we see little benefit in it right now because people don't know what park I'm in. They're not aware of I'm in a regional park versus a different park. And the act of brand building is just a heavy lift. We have to invest in it. We have to do a lot of work to distinguish a regional park from another entity. When talking as a whole, people are just happy that people are experiencing parks. And so how do we continue to drive park usage overall to grow the region and the individual entities? I think that's a big opportunity for the Regional Parks and Trails team. These are some of the specific comments we got as it relates to that. People saw the opportunity for a unified message about connecting with nature, getting out in the parks, and knowing what's there that you were unaware of. But there was concern with, causing additional confusion, because there are some entities out there that have established a brand in their area, and adding a regional parks brand or message on top of that could compete with that. But in reality, we're all trying to lift the system up in what we're trying to do. So this gets me into our kind of summary and recommendations. How do we bring this into action? And how does the Regional Parks and Trails team specifically help work with the region and everything that we do? It was loud and clear that there is a clear shared objective across the region, and it's twofold. It's increased park usage among a more diverse audience, and then to get people to experience a park that have not considered it in the future. And our work as the Met Council should work to amplify everyone's efforts. And in doing so, where the goal is to raise awareness and usage of regional parks and trails. So how do we do that? I mentioned this before, but for a park user, it's not about I'm going to a regional park or a city park. It's I'm going to the park. And what am I going to the park for? I'm going for a walk. I'm going to go biking. I want to go snowshoe. These are activities that they're seeking out, and they want places to go that and maybe places that they hadn't considered before. There was a lot of conversation. There were some people that were outside of the metro area, for example. I'm trying to think of the exact park we were talking about, but they had people seeking out kayaking out there because a friend of theirs had told them, hey, this is a great place to go kayak. And that entity was, said to them at the time, well, you could do this closer to home, which I think home was St. Paul in that respect. There's a park there, there's a regional park there that offers the same activities. They just weren't aware of that. So how can we use that activity to cross-pollinate usage across the system? We did ask and talk to the people that are currently using parks. Why do you go to a park? What are you using it for? These are the top activities that came out. Probably not a lot of surprises here. Relaxing and mental health probably spiked quite a bit over the last year. But walking, hiking, biking, those type of activities are what drove a majority of park usage of the people that we spoke to. And when asked what would make you consider using a different regional park or visiting one in the future, it was all activity driven. They were like, yeah, I would I want to go bike somewhere, I want to go hike somewhere. That's why I would seek out another park. But the reality is people are just unaware of what the quality and quantity within the system. They don't know, as I mentioned, how this activity could have, you could have the same experience in so many different areas across the region. So, driving that awareness and connecting them with the activities that they're already doing, I think is an important step. So how do we sum this up in our opportunities and the role that the Met Council Regional Parks team, the Parks and Trails team, I should be saying, creates for the future. So being that connector for the region, connecting residents to those activities that I've been talking about, but then also helping agencies come together for shared planning and cross-pollination. So they're driving usage across the whole system. And then providing thought leadership. That did come up quite a bit, that the individual agencies are appreciative of the Regional Parks and Trails team, the studies that they're doing to try and drive equity, to try and drive usage, etc. That information is in those types of studies are things that they can't necessarily do on their own. They appreciate the thought leadership and they want that from the Regional Parks team. But then using interest to drive usage across the region. So how do we continue to diversify the region by getting people connected to other activities outside of their park comfort zone? And I think there's a lot of opportunity to that. And there was a lot of openness across the agencies to help connect people to other parts of the region and other activities like what they're used to doing. And what role does the Regional Parks and Trails team play? And it is, creating marketing efforts that drive new use. And so it's probably centered around the activities that we're doing, but then helping just get people into parks in general. Like I said early on, users of our parks, to them, a park is a park. And how do we get people into parks more often? And then when we do so, how do we connect them to other entities within the region? Finally, using our visitors to drive additional usage is a huge point overall. Those users are the ones that are posting on Instagram. They're leading people to discover other areas within the region that weren't there previously. And so how do we use our digital platforms and unique digital platforms to help promote park usage overall? The story I share, this is my son on the right. And 2 years ago, we were looking for something to do during the pandemic, and someone had posted about Carver Regional, I think it's Carver Regional Park. I'm probably murdering the name. We just talked about them earlier. And I was unaware of them. It was an easy, 20, 30 minutes outside of town for me. And we ended up going and experiencing them, and we wouldn't have otherwise. And it's just because of Instagram. So how do we use, social media such as that to continue to drive usage? How do we use our website to continue to educate, connect people, help them understand what they're going to experience in those parks? And then once we get them there, how do we guide them to different activities and doing different things? So yeah, the idea of an app, a regional park app that helps you navigate the park that you're in, connects you to other parks. These are all opportunities for the future, I think, to just help drive usage overall. And that is my recap. And I think we're opening it up to discussion and questions, and Emmett has a good discussion guide for us to do so.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Scott. And Tony, I will pull up that. Just a minute, please. Can people see that?
Yes.
Great. I think, Michelle, you might take the lead and with Amanda, who's also joined us.
Yes, Emmett, thank you. And Amanda and I will be just kind of walking you through the questions you see in front of you. Before I get started, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to be here today and to talk about this topic with you. I manage the communications team here at the council, and one of the things that I oversee are certainly some of our engagement efforts, our social media efforts, and a handful of other content-related directions. So I'm really interested to hear from you about your response to this work and some of the things that we know you've been discussing here and making sure that we're being as responsive as possible to some of the needs and expectations that you see for our system and how we can support whatever our system looks like moving forward. So I think I'll just kind of open it up with the first question and say, so many of you did participate in this process. We're curious, based on the presentation today, what you heard in this presentation and, how that sort of leads to some of the prominent things that you're thinking about in this work. You can go ahead and just unmute yourself and fire away.
This is Bob Moeller. One of the things I heard is that the distinction that we think about and talk about regional parks versus city parks or county parks is not a distinction that the population as a whole really visualizes or thinks much about. That they think about a park or they think about a trail and they're happy with that, but the distinction between regional and city or county or whatever may not exist in most people's mind. One of the things I heard.
Thank you. Any thoughts about that?
Hi, this is Cecily, and I may be making this point out of order in your list of questions.
It's okay.
One thing that came to my mind in talking about regional parks and our 10 implementing agencies is one thing that National Parks has been doing during the pandemic. They have some very heavily used national parks. So they've been trying to highlight some less used parks that are also rich in resources. So perhaps that is a marketing opportunity for the Met Council to say, hey, you may be traveling a little farther, but here's a gem of a park not too far from you.
Thank you for that remark, Commissioner. I think there's also some really fun things that the national parks are doing with social media identities that I think are a tremendous opportunity. It's very fun to think of each park as having its own voice. And that just really engaging and allows for people to connect to, places in a way that's a lot more, about the people and the fun that you can experience in these places. So that's a really good reminder. Thank you. Others?
And certainly a theme for me is we're hearing a lot of stuff that we've talked about before. So the thing for us to keep in mind will be what is actually going to be different about what we do now. We've known some of these things, we're hearing themes. What's the actual action item that we can come up of this with?
Do you have anything top of mind?
Not yet.
Fair.
This is Monica. I wasn't in the commission when you started this study, but I read, everything that you said, and I listened to here. And to answer to your first question, I hear you did a lot of work and study and research, so that's great. Congratulations on that. And I think we have a long work ahead of us if we want to, start growing the audience of the users in our parks, especially because I'm in a commission and I still have my doubts when somebody asks me, so what is a regional park? And well, now that you ask, let me think about this twice. And even Emmett explained it to me and like 10 times, and I still have my questions, and I'm here.
Great.
Other thing I heard, again, this is Bob, is that the regional park and trail branding didn't seem to gain much traction because there's so little awareness now, and that the difference between regional parks and city parks and other parks is not an important distinction in their mind. So it might be a effort which costs a lot and not have a great deal of benefit. Did I hear that right?
Yes, Commissioner, I think you did hear that right. But the other thing that I think that we can take away from this, because we heard this certainly in this work, is the really valuable time and effort that each regional park agency has been putting into this idea of developing their brands. And those are strong and people identify with those. And it's hard to create something new that would, inadvertently, but definitely compete with that in a way that is meaningful and helpful. So it really makes sense for us to find ways to leverage those existing brands and identities rather than try to create something new.
Hi, this is Cecily again. And two other things sort of came to mind, I think, based on the presentation. One is that if you're hiking, biking, or traveling on a regional trail, you might, of course, go through a regional park. You might also go through a city park or a national park. And a regional park may be very close to a city or a DNR or a national park. And yes, they're kind of different because, the focus is of the regional nature, and people may not really understand how, a city or a county may have both. They may have regional parks. They may also have pocket parks or mini parks or neighborhood parks, and why it's important to have the whole portfolio in our metropolitan area.
It's an excellent point, and the connections between all the park resources that we have might not be noticeable to the average person, but are super important to making sure that they're getting to the places that they want to go to and experiencing the things that they want to experience. It's a really great point.
This is Jeremy. I'd like to build on what Cecily was just saying. So I see a lot of this work speaking to me in my understanding of people driving their use of open space and parkland based on activities. So activities drive the purpose for visiting, and then that's how they connect with the open space themselves. I think I shared a link in the chat about how the Forest Service has done this with their integrated interactive visitor use map. And I think as the lead agency that has a regional interest, it's not in the council's interest or MPOSC's interest even to advocate for an independent brand, but instead to be that convener that draws together the various resources from neighborhood to federal and displays them for visitors to plan their activities on these integrated lands within our region. And I think the best communication we could do is ignoring the color of money that defines whether it's a regional or local or state park, and instead focus on the fact that I want to go snowshoeing. I can filter then all of the lands in the region where I can go snowshoeing and see this park is the best place for that closest to me. Or I want to go see someplace new. I have filtered by snowshoeing. I can now see snowshoeing is available at this city park in Blaine. I don't know. That's just my thought from what I heard, and then connecting a little bit of what Cecily was talking about too.
Yeah, Commissioner, that's a really good example. And it's not really news that we could use some different tools to start connecting people to activities. And I think that this really illustrates that's make sure that we're focusing on some of those things and helping people find them and helping people connect to them. So I think that's a really excellent piece of direction from this work as well.
Now we do have
I think
some.
I'm gonna keep moving us through the question. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. My speakers cut out sometimes when it's quiet for a minute, so please continue.
I was just going to quickly say that we do have some systems for filtering by activity that have been rolled out in the last couple of years. And it'll be interesting to see whether, as people become more aware of some of those, if that helps, or if we need to do significantly more than what those do on that particular front.
And Tony, what I would argue is that those are largely focused on things that are affiliated with the region, as I understand it. And my point is recognizing that integrated relationship where users don't see those boundaries because they only exist administratively within our context.
Yeah, the one I'm thinking of in particular covers anything that's either a regional park, whether it's within the metro or not, or a state facility, but it does not have the non-regionally designated municipal and county ones just because of the scope of the initial project.
I just wanted to hop in there on this first one. I wanted to kind of amplify what I heard, what maybe I misheard Tony say earlier, but I think it's really important that I don't think that I was engaged on this project at all with the team working on it. And there's a lot of information that we have heard before and that we've researched before too, in addition to kind of lacking. I just threw in the chat information that we've gathered through significant research work over the last particularly 6 years or so, maybe 7. So that seems to me like a miss, and I think it would be really good to use in particular the work that was around communities of color, because it's a real gap in what was shared here. So so that's something that I feel like is accurate, that we've heard low level before.
Yeah, Councilmember, I really appreciate that point. And this is really the first step in a more specific marketing and communications evaluation. We do obviously need to refer to all of that excellent research that tells us about park use and access to things and places where the connections are weaker, and we can do some work in marketing and communications to make them stronger. And I think that, pairing that with this and as we move forward, doing more intentional, in-depth engagement with communities as you identify is going to be pretty essential to making sure that we're actually hitting those marks moving forward. This is definitely not the comprehensive look at all of the things that we certainly will need to do long term in order to make that real.
Michelle, I think you're misunderstanding me. We've done extensive work. And I think what I heard also from Tony was, when are we going to do stuff? Stop asking. We got to stop asking people. Tons of people are getting researched up one side and down the other. And we've done it ourselves. We got to start delivering on what people have asked for and for what we've learned. And I've heard Bob say that many, many times, and maybe that's how we got here. We got to start acting. And we know a barrier has been, and is in all public agencies, our lack of communication, because communication budgets for public agencies aren't the most robust or most supported. But without it, without communicating, we know, and we know from our own research, I put a couple other links just in a quick Google search, we know that's a barrier. So I'm, this is my last official meeting as a council member. And so my encouragement is we gotta stop navel gazing at this and start working.
Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen, I just want to thank you for that. And I can't agree more. I mean, the idea that we have, we have really studied this. We've looked a lot. I think that one of the things that was unique about this study was it was a pretty small, group of people surveyed. It was people with, the in-person interviews were really focused on communication directors and marketing specialists in the agencies. And I think there is, like, one of the things that Scott was talking about was this desire to come together as a group of communications folks. And that hasn't happened. And I think that that's something that is an action, council member, that we can take and that we must take in terms of, like, what can we do to amplify and reach more people. So
I just would like to jump in a little too. I agree. And I think the goal of this study was to get the agencies on board with us. I think we knew from Raintree's research that raising awareness was one of our biggest barriers, like awareness. And I think we were trying to figure out what was our role at the council in marketing, and would a brand be the answer? And I think from the beginning, we weren't really sure that was it, but that was some of the things we had heard from agencies. Would our own independent social media be a good fit? Would the agencies be willing and interested in coming together as a cohort to talk more deeply about this? And what resources could we share to get them to the table? Because I think in the past, as our regional parks ambassador, when I've done things that needed to engage with communications staff across all 10 agencies, it was really hard and a huge barrier, and not everyone would come to the table, not everyone would participate. And so in my mind, and Michelle and Emmett, you can correct me, I think one of our biggest parts of doing this was, how do we all get on the same page to start some action? Because I agree, I think, again, as the park ambassador day one, I was like, wait a minute, who's telling the story of the whole system? Like, each agency is telling their own story, but like, who's holding that regional story? And currently nobody, right? And I think that that is one of our roles, but it has to be in collaboration with agencies, because again, I think what Tony was talking about was the Climate and Get Outdoors. There's a website we created, and we put money into it, and it's not that well used. And we can't, as the council, create a tool or an app, because no one's going to go to the Met Council website on Saturday and be like, I want to get outside. Let me go to the Met Council's website and figure out what's going on. So I think part of this, in my mind, was like, how do we build those stronger partnerships with our agency partners so that we are doing something that they're interested in, so that they'll show up at the table, and that we can share research and resources. So I 100% agree. I think what I'm most excited about with this study is on the same page as you, is like, what are we going to do? Like, when can we start? What are we going to do? And Emmett is right. I think the first step is convening communication staff across the 10 agencies, because they've never all been at the same table. Which seems kind of silly, but in the words of Emmett Mullen, what an opportunity.
I like how none of us are even quite sure what the name of that website really is. It's something great outdoors, but yeah, I don't know either.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that there are so many opportunities to coordinate and bring better resources together to do some of this work. And that's I mean, for me, that's the most exciting opportunity. I think your point, Councilmember Singer-Bretson, is huge, that we need resources to do good communications, and we can't do that by ourselves. We need to be working together to make the best use of those resources. And that's, you know, from the smallest, you know, rural county to the, you know, biggest parts of our region. So I think that's pretty, it's a pretty big opportunity that we're really looking forward to as we move forward. I think I'm gonna suggest that we kind of take the questions that you see in front of you, and if there's anything that you want to add in any of those topic areas, just go ahead and let us know. In particular, are there things that you want, are there more things that you want to know, to the point of, you know, we need to start bringing folks together and doing things? We're anxious to do that, but we want to make sure we don't gloss over important things either. So if there's some questions that people want to know more answers to or more information about, this is a really great time to help us do that conversation.
Michelle, I have this is my last big thing. I'm putting it in the Slack for everybody, but this next question rubs me a little bit. Because we talk about this all the time. I talk about it all the time, and to ask, what's the connection between equity and communications and marketing seems to be a missed opportunity of a question in my mind. I wonder, if our work has to be equitable, what should we expect from communications and marketing around this, internal teams and external teams? And in another part of my work on the council, we talk a lot about making sure the consultants we use, the firms we use, that we're vetting them for their capacity to do equity work or to be representative of underrepresented people. And I'm not sure if that happened in this situation. Reviewing the materials that were provided, reviewing this firm's website and information about themselves, we can't be asking about equity in this kind of way. We all know too much, and the work is too sophisticated at this point. And so to me, if we need to do something around this type of a question, I hope we're thinking about what should be the expectations for this work if we're doing it equitably, and what, and this is not, I don't mean this consults the consultants working on this. In the field of communications work in Minnesota in particular, it's one of the least diverse fields that there is. And we have a tremendous opportunity to help amplify and ensure that this field diversifies. If we hold that expectation, just like we do for the people clean the tunnel on 94 or build a light rail or build a building. So for me, that's a lever we have. And I'm not sure, but it's not obvious that there's any kind of leadership or expertise around multicultural marketing, intercultural marketing, or communications. And some of the questions asked lead me to believe that knowledge was not represented on the team. And in our community, with everything that we have going on, that's not acceptable any longer.
Yep. Nothing to add, but I agree 100%. And I thank you for your report.
I think some of my questions, especially before we have to transition to a different liaison, so some of this will go through you, Linnea. From what we're seeing, you know, we have some ideas of things that will need to happen. So my question to staff is, what are you going to need from us and from the council in terms of, do you need any new guidance or policy or that kind of thing drafted by this body that does not yet exist? Or do you need any budgetary things approved by the council that you don't already have? Or do you feel like you kind of have tools to work with through just discussions like this? Is there any sort of like official business that you need to support something to move forward with?
Tony, those are great questions. And right now, I really think that we're at that point where we do need more discussion around what exactly we're going to do. I mean, Councilmember Atlas Engelbretson, I'm sensitive to the idea of navel gazing. Like, we've been sitting on this for a while, but we do know that, you know, lack of awareness is really our most challenging topic. And I think we're starting to dig into that. And this is what I think the council member was referring to, that the idea that we have a fairly sophisticated understanding about why some people don't feel welcome at regional parks and what are we doing about that. And that is where I think a lot of the future work resides. So how do we diversify our staff teams? How do we ensure that there aren't ordinances on the books that sort of make it more difficult for certain groups to get out and do what they want to outdoors? I think that those are the areas that really we're looking to go to next. And but that said, I think that we're in the sort of discussion and dialogue point right now, and I do think this is. I mean, I know there are actions moving forward right now across our system to make things more accessible, to increase greater awareness, and so forth.
Can we get the parks listed on bus route maps? Honestly, we have all these communication products already. Why is it so hard to get the parks people to talk to the transit people? I'm exhausted bringing this up. I feel like since I started on this commission that transit does not need to be a different silo. You're gonna reach people that maybe haven't used the parks as much because they rely on Metro Transit to get from A to B. And perhaps they could stop part of the way down the road and get a seat for a nice breath of fresh air before they continue on their ride. So I think in terms of gaining representativeness and reaching populations, we could do a lot better just by utilizing the resources we already have out in the community and recognizing that there are connections to parks that can be made with marketing materials, products, and service actions that are already in place. There's money being spent on this. So I think just using what we're already doing more effectively would be a great first step.
That's a really good point, in that a lot of the stuff that we've talked about with transportation before has been about how we really wish there were more bus routes that went near parks, and they've pretty easily shot that down of, well, we're not going to spend money for that to run a different route. But for the routes that we already have, just putting things on maps and on the little trip finder tool and things like that shouldn't be a significant budgetary hit. That's probably a good ask to focus on, because it's so much smaller than our separate routes one.
Yeah, there's some very simple things that we could do, and that is a great example of, you know, just highlighting things better that we already do. And it would also be a really easy thing to build a campaign around, where we, you know, use graphics and icons to highlight things differently so that we're drawing attention to that kind of stuff. I think that's an awesome idea and should be sort of high on the list, because it should be pretty easy to pick off, you think.
Hi, this is Monica. You know, I was thinking kind of like Jeremy, there are a lot of things that could be pretty easy to do and fairly almost for free. Like the mention of social media. I'm working right now in marketing and so through social media, and it's a nightmare if you actually want to get sales done through them. However, if you want to raise awareness, there is a whole bunch of fun things that you have to do now, because everything that works is videos. But I don't know, we can have Amanda and Emmett making videos on the parks for 3 minutes showing what it is and just post them there, or have some, you know, I don't know, when Anthony goes to the park, just post a a video or send it to somebody, and we can just have it live. Those are free accounts that you shouldn't be having to worry about. The other thing is, I know it's very hard to work with school districts, so having information for anything there is very hard. But there are a whole bunch of charter schools and private schools that actually work with a lot of diversity communities. My daughter goes to one in Brooklyn Center, and it's like 95% African American kids in low income homes. And it's a small school, and I'm sure it will be pretty easy to talk to the principal and say, hey, here are our information for the parks. Give it to the kids. They might go out over the weekend. Other things like that. What I did learn being at the city for 7 years is that no matter what you want to do in these things, it takes so long. Like I always joke, if I want to get a pencil, I would just walk and get it. But if I go through the city, it will take me 5 years to find a pencil. So I don't know. So actually, my question is, we have all this information. Now what? What is the next step? Because I mean, it is great and I would like to see it moving, but what is the next part? What are we doing from here? So we're done with the meeting, and then what do you need from me, or what do we have to do to keep it going?
So as Amanda mentioned, among our next steps are to start, convening the communications folks in the different implementing agencies to really talk about some of the needs, many of which you've already talked about today. But there are certainly things that we can start aligning better, either storytelling or specific ways to reach different constituencies, setting some specific goals, making sure that we're aware of where the opportunities are for each of the implementing agencies. And then really just starting to talk about what resources we really can bring to the table. Emmett mentioned before that now's the time to really start assessing from a planning perspective, what we can do in the short term and what we might need in the long term. And those are going to be the things that we'll be bringing back to this group to the chair's point about policies that might be needed or additional budget that may be needed. But the reality is we have some resources that we could expend in ways that are much more coordinated. And that's really our goal, is to try and figure out if we have some stuff now that we could leverage and if we need things in the future. So it's a both and we're expecting to start doing that work here soon and getting back to you with progress as we move forward.
Is that something where there's essentially a plan for, like monthly or some sort of other recurring schedule with the implementing agencies?
Yeah, that's the idea. Go ahead, Amanda.
Yeah, we were thinking like similar to the outreach cohort where we pulled together the engagement and outreach staff across the 10 agencies, and I meet with them monthly, and during COVID it was twice a month. So we're thinking hopefully like a monthly cohort with the agencies, and then hopefully soon to launch some of those ideas, like what do we need to have a social media account for regional parks? Who would be fulfilling that? How, like all those different things, like asking those kind of full questions before we launch them. And then also like doing it in partnership with the agencies, like we said, to make sure that, again, we can't do anything without them. And we want to, as CCF said, like amplify the work that they're already doing. Like we want to share their activities. Is there a way to pull together all of the events happening so it could be in one area? Is there a way to have a map that truly shows all the trails and how you move across them? And how do we use the resources that we have at the council to amplify the work that they're already doing? Because we're not here to, like we said, create a new brand or take over the stuff that they're doing. We want to amplify their work to really get people not only into parks, but to fall in love with them.
Amanda, that just gave me an idea. One of the things that's happening, there's just a renaissance of BIPOC, Black, African American, Indigenous, people from across all types of backgrounds, Hmong, Lao, West African, name your group, that are going into the outdoors and doing this work, supporting each other on their own, oftentimes like myself and Anthony, spending our own money to do it. And one of the things that's really challenging is having a platform that helps you in communicating with people who are interested in joining you. I think about it like my son, I dropped him off, as you know, earlier at mountain bike practice. And there's an app that's paid for by Dick's Sporting Goods for that people can use to facilitate their team and club doing some type of sport. What if that app that you had also helped facilitate these groups being able to gather, join, connect, know where to go? That is a piece that is, you know, we piece together different things like GroupMe and Facebook, and it never, you know, it's never great. It takes a ton of energy and effort and time. And it's an opportunity to provide a valuable resource to all kinds of people in community who are trying to use space. I think there was a comment made earlier that people don't know the difference. People know the difference because state parks have a gate and take a fee. Regional parks have a gate, and people think because that gate is there that there's a fee or some kind of standard or a permit. So people do know the difference. I see it in my own trips. When I do something at a regional or state park, people question what to do when we're at the regional parks, and I tell them I have a lot less participation at my state park trips. That fee, that gate, and the distance is just enough to make people think it's not easy. So while they may not know what it is, it makes a difference, and people do know.
It's a great idea around having an app that supports the work that BIPOC communities are already doing. And I think of the same thing with social media. Like the people that I personally follow are all kinds of different communities, like BIPOC communities out in the outdoors. And if we could help amplify that as well, I think that, again, when we were talking with CCF and we're like, we don't know if we have the capacity to run social media, what would we need? And we were reminded like the users do a lot of that work for you. And we would just be creating a platform that users would fill in because they already, like you're saying, those communities are already using our parks, and we just don't have a platform for them to tell their story. And so that's a really good reminder.
Along with that, I want to recall what Monica said, to remember the schools, individual schools, not just the school districts, and churches too. Like one of the soccer leagues I played in, we got together because 2/3 of the team went to the same church, and the pastor was the person who organized the team. And so it's valuable to make sure that we're hitting non-traditional recreational opportunities and organizing groups, because they'll do that organizing work and build those trips and activity groups for us.
I'd like to come back to a point that we talked about a little earlier. We talked about the fact that branding probably wouldn't have too much benefit because it's not well known and people don't see much connection. But I would say a couple of things. Using Three Rivers as an example, the Three Rivers Park District, I think, at least for me anyway, has a positive image. And when I think about Three Rivers, I think about quality, and I think about, and I guess I think it was a safe environment. Lene, I'm not sure that fits in the equitable question, but I want to talk a little bit about branding because I think it can help. So when I read the words Metropolitan Council Regional Parks, that's a lot of big words, and it's kind of hard to picture what you're talking about. What if we had some better name, some better brand name for our parks and trails that had a more positive environment? Three Rivers just doesn't mean a lot, but it has kind of a nice feel to it. So I'm asking a question. Do we have an option of naming what we do or our regional parks and trails something other than Metropolitan Council Regional Parks? That's the first thing. Secondly, I think it's important for us to convey a sense of safety and welcome. And so my sense about branding is that if we can, in part, by supporting our implementing agencies with some funding of their communications in a spot where we can also show our logo and our simplified brand, and hopefully convey safety and enjoyment, that we would have a value to a brand that right now the mouthful of Metropolitan Council Parks and Trails doesn't get there for me.
And just to go on a little bit of a sidetrack with the branding question, I think there's a couple of different possible things that can refer to. And here we had our consultants asking a very specific question about, does branding help us with getting people into parks and dealing with equity issues and things like that? Me thinking about the things that I think about, I'm also going off on a tangent of, would something about branding or similar to branding also help us convey something that would change this idea of people not knowing the difference between a regional park and a county park, a city park and a state park? Because that's been part of the struggle we have even as commissioners when we talk about our policy stuff, when we review park policy plan amendments and then see some of the ideas we've had in the last 2 years or so kind of pushing the boundaries of some of our definitions. We need to have an identity of what does it mean to be a regional park. And that is interesting because it's not just within the 7-county metro, but we also have the Greater Minnesota regional parks handled by the Greater Minnesota Regional Parks and Trails Commission. And is there something where there can be an identity, not necessarily a brand, but an identity and common understanding of what makes something a regional park in Minnesota, both within the metro and outside, and how that can drive different expectations than other kinds of units? And we talked about how a lot of things are driven by activities, and that's a large portion of our conversation about what is and isn't allowed for facilities is around activities. Can we get an understanding of, okay, for this kind of activity, you can go anywhere. For this kind of activity, you want to go to a regional park. For this kind of activity, you want to go to a state park. This kind of activity, you want to go to a city or a county park. And could there be something that we could do even in conjunction, not only with our regional park implementing agencies within the metro, but also with that Greater Minnesota Commission and the DNR to better convey, we don't have these distinctions of different park units just for fun. They're supposed to be providing different sorts of experiences. And if we aren't telling people what those experiences are, they don't know where to look for the experience that they want. So is there something we can do more statewide to identify experience and activity tied to park unit designation type, and have that be part of our understanding of what gets people in? And that would also come back then to our immediate concern of, we've talked about sort of pipelining of, you get someone into a local park doing something, and then how do you get them into the regional system? They would know how to graduate if they have the identity of, okay, that next identity, that next activity, or that next experience, knowing that there's different kinds of parks and what that really means. They know what, we talked about knowing what to expect. What am I getting myself into? Maybe that's something that goes beyond just Met Council, but covering around the state.
I think what I heard from both Tony and Bob, I think, and what I've heard from this is it's less about a brand, like a logo that maybe we stick on things, but more how we tell our story. And I think that we can do a much better job of that. And we can brand our media or our social media campaign of like top 10 things to do in a regional park. Like we can still include regional park. I just think what we heard clearly from the agencies and what I think me and Michelle both think is like, we don't necessarily need another logo that we put on top of signs that already maybe have too many words and are also already in English and are already hard to decipher. It's like, how can we tell the story of the regional system, Tony, like what you're saying? And I think we could do a really good job of that in partnership with our agencies to relay our system. Like, I think we can still tell the story that like the regional park system, like I always think of it as, you know, the state park that's close to home, because you can camp in regional parks. You can't in neighborhood park. You know, we just haven't told that story well enough. And I think that there's some really creative, fun ways that we could do that, that would raise the brand or the understanding of our system. That isn't necessarily like another logo that we need to put on already logo heavy signs. But I do think you're both right, Tony and Bob, that it does matter that we're a regional park in that we have different activities and different facilities. And I mean, I feel like I'm telling people all the time who don't realize that like you can camp 20 minutes away from the cities. You don't have to go out to a state park, that you can hike close by. So I think that is again, in the words of Emmett Mullet, such an opportunity that we have. And I think we could do some fun, playful ways of sharing that information.
Yeah, I think I'm basically envisioning converting the word regional into a brand, like it not adding anything else to it, no other name about Met Council or any other logos, but everything already has a sign that says regional park or regional trail or regional park reserve. Just try to make that word be a brand that has an identifiable, when someone sees the word regional, they know something about what that means.
Yeah, even having a hashtag people use, again, it would accumulate the user's information. Like we wouldn't have to be out taking all those photos. We already have people in those spaces. And so, you know, getting that so that it's all showing up in a social media way could be really powerful.
Yeah, there are lots of really fun ways to create visual cues and you know, sort of a lot of the things that you're talking about too are about voice and characteristic. And this is super nerdy, like communications and marketing stuff, but we can do a lot without actually having that much of a shift or a change. It's just being intentional about those cues.
Well, I was really intrigued with what I heard Tony say, because if you look at regional parks around the state, they're in urban, suburban, and rural areas. And like I live in Washington County, and I'm closer to Chisago County than I am to Ramsey County. So I think most people in my area think of where I live as more rural than suburban. And I think people in Hennepin County might feel very differently when talking about their regional parks. So how can we have regional as a descriptor that could be really anywhere in the state? Not just a metropolitan thing.
I mean, it's a good question. And in some cases, it's not just about the geographic designations, it's about the feeling or the expectation or the understanding that you create, which is also about identity and cues. And it's not just about the words or the terms, it's about the experience and the feeling. There's lots of ways you could go with that.
Other thoughts today, really interesting conversation. And, you know, earlier today I was at a ribbon cutting for the River to River Dakota County Greenway. and regional trail. So it goes from South St. Paul to Lilydale, and it's sort of like that hump of the Mississippi River that goes into St. Paul. This like is the cutoff piece that will take you from the Mississippi River to the Mississippi River. It's kind of interesting that way. But the thing that's unique and that is a little challenging outside the metropolitan area is our network of trails in the metropolitan region is really, I mean, we're not there yet. There's still huge gaps, but we're getting toward critical mass where, you know, you can really ride on trails to a lot of places where people, you know, especially, you know, in urban and suburban areas, you know, there are options. And so the idea that this is a growing network that is really made for, you know, how do we ensure this is welcoming and accessible? I think those are critical questions that the jury's still out on. But that is something that's unique about our metropolitan area. So that's just what lends itself to this regional conversation. So I'm really liking it, and I know there's a lot more to talk about.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody, for all your really great ideas and for sharing with us tonight. I took a lot of notes, so thank you.
Thank you. I'm sure we'll be hearing more shortly. Sounds like that pretty much wraps up our information item then, so we'll move on to reports, if that sounds good. Okay. For chair reports, I guess my big thing will be, of course, thank you for all of your work with us, Linnea. Sad to see you go, but I'm sure it will not be the last time we talk. So, looking forward to seeing whatever role you can manage to work into your other life pieces coming up. With that, are there any other commissioner reports? Okay, and staff.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I wanted to just start with thanking Councilmember Atlas Engebretson. She has been a tireless voice for equity. I can honestly say that I'm so grateful for her participation and the fact that all of you are here today. I know she's had a hand in so many of those appointments. And so I think it's a great reflection of your service, council members. So thank you. We will miss you, but we know you're not going away. You are welcome back anytime. And but truly, thank you. Your efforts were significant. I wanted to thank all the commissioners and agencies that were able to join the Stories I Didn't Know video last Thursday. It was a really great discussion. It wasn't a large one, but it was just an excellent one. And so it is on our website. If you were not able to join, go to the Parks and Open Space spot on the council's website and you can watch it. It's only an hour, and Rita Davern, Ramona Quito Stately, and Ruben Quito Stately deserve just a ton of credit for facilitating a really meaningful discussion. So, and Bob, thank you again for suggesting that. I mentioned that I was at the River to River ribbon cutting. It was actually a tunnel that was going underneath Robert Street. It's a super complicated and multi-funding type effort. And it's a huge boost for the our regional system for the city of St. Paul and for Dakota County. So I think it's awesome. Go check it out. And then I'll just say next Monday, October 11th, is Indigenous Peoples Day. There will be a celebration at Bruce Vento Regional Trail and Nature Sanctuary. It's the groundbreaking for the Wakan Teepee Center. So super exciting. It's in the morning. I think it's at 10 a.m. I'm not positive. So check the City of St. Paul and the Lower Phelan Creek websites or call me and I'll let you know. But again, Councilmember Atlas Engebretson, thank you for your service. We are grateful. So.
Thank you, and thank you all the staff too, if I didn't say that. And I think Lisa Brajas is on the call too. Thank you for your leadership and support of the work of the commissioners and the team. Lisa, and all that you've done to really help enable the work of advancing equity and also just advancing good stuff for our parks and our climate. So thank you. Thank you all commissioners. I know I can step away from this table because I know you got it and feel comfortable doing it, and that's a real blessing for me. So thank you so very much for your leadership.
Thank you. All right, with that, I believe we are ready to adjourn. Thank you everyone for your time tonight.